World's shortest. You're good now.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. As you know, I'm Ben Muldrow with Arnett Muldrow and Associates. I am joined by Randy Wilson with Community Design Solutions, and we are here on behalf of downtown Delaware and funded through a USDA grant to come through and doing a process that we're calling Downtown Roadmap. It's a very simple assessment visit to be able to follow up with two of the communities that received conceptual vision plans 2 years ago, and then also to check in with Laurel, who received a branding service about, 18 months or 2 years ago as well, and just be able to A, highlight some of the successes you realized, and then B, help to make sure that your sights are set on the most logical, low-hanging fruit moving forward. And we're going to jump right in. As I said, we have 3 communities, and we're trying to kind of tell that story of 3 different communities and figure out ways that you all don't feel like you are sitting through a presentation. Here you go, Ian. A presentation that is only 30% relevant to you. You know, so we organized it in a pretty simple to understand fashion. We have 3 main sections. The first overall section is called Tell Your Story. Now, in that section, we had a slightly more targeted initiative for each one of you communities. In Bridgeville, we're calling it Capture the Visitor. In Seaford, Manage the Message. And in Laurel, Reintroduce Laurel. And we'll go into that in a little more detail as we get into it. Then from there, we have The Power of Place. Bridgeville, Invest in Character. Seaford, focusing on connections. Laurel, preserve your competitive advantage. And then finally, seizing the opportunity. Bridgeville, up your game. Seaford, create density. Laurel, bring Laurel to life. Okay, so what you have in front of you on the sheet is essentially a simplification of those themes that we've identified for each one of your communities, and then the tactics that we'll describe as we go through them. So that's why everybody has a sheet that is specific to your community. We're not normally able to print things out as we go. So y'all are fancy. You get to officially receive the fancy version. So, yeah, go ahead.
Before you jump into something specific, I think one of the things that encouraged Ben and I about the notion of having 3 common themes, now, albeit each of your individual recommendations and tactics underneath these 3 are different, the fact that you have 3 basic overall concepts in common creates this opportunity for you all to have a common dialogue about these things. And frankly, not so much levels of playing field, but hopefully you can borrow and beg and help each other accomplish these same goals, even though you're going to be going about it.
Absolutely. Thanks for throwing that in. So when we kick off with Tell the Story, and again, we're going to kind of move through this community by community, and Randy is not being particularly responsive. So one of the first things that we did during this process was we wanted to hear about the successes. And in all 3 communities, the thing that hit us was how surprised and pleased we were with the progress. So what we did, and I'm going to now share this with, I've got a couple copies of these for Bridgeville. What I did was I took that strategy board that we had shared with the community, and I created this 1-page document that helps to highlight some of your successes. Everything from adopting the brand, opening up the bike trail, even private sector investments like the expansion of T.S. Smith, the reuse of Old Dollar General into Downtown Alley, the retail recruitment and how to open a business in downtown that you guys created, new gateway sign investments, starting this new fabulous Friday, the banners, and even making merchandise. So things that were identified for you to accomplish, and you accomplished. And now you can share those successes on 1 page, and you can see the things that are happening. This is one of those tasks that it is often difficult to figure out how to tell people what you've done in a way that's easy to digest. So we just went ahead and created that, and hopefully that can serve as a framework of how you can start to tell that story a little bit more periodically. Does that make sense? Do you think that that's something that might be useful for you all to be able to just share with others and say, hey, believe it or not, you might not realize it, but a lot is going on here in Bridgeville. So that first, and the reason why this fits into capture the visitor is because it is essential for you to have excitement on your residence level before you can ever kind of capture that visitor. That interaction that happens, the random interactions that can happen, the way that citizens feel about their own homes, the pride they have in the community, the willingness to invest in their own property. Those are messages that ring true in all three communities, being able to engage the citizenry so they are active and they're investing in their own community. Now, in addition to that, I created some additional merchandising options and things that we had talked about. I think right now you can go into town, you can buy license tags. So being able to show where this logo can make its way onto logo merchandise and have this happen in the business community. So the business community is profiting from this identity. And one of the questions that was asked, and to me it was an interesting angle on the messaging that we had suggested, because there was a certain amount of question as to whether putting a rocking chair on the logo made it too geriatric. I think that's probably not the nicest way to say it, you know? And I don't think that it does. I think that there's a certain, there's a role that Bridgeville plays in folks entering into the community, entering into the state, and you have to make it what you want it to be. So suggesting things like rocking chairs and welcome mats and that life that happens out on that front porch, that warm, inviting nature, that is the role that we want the community to play in the overall state. Wanted to reinforce some of the overall marketing message that had been created, because I'm not sure how much those tools were kind of realized or made available. So there were some ads that were already kind of designed from a formatting standpoint, and again, any of those messaging or photos are available for you guys to use. We did a couple different variations of those, and again, all those things exist in the resource package that I'm going to share with you all to make sure that folks have access to the links. And then something else that we discussed in Bridgeville was the idea that as we go through and we do these tasks, the EDC might need to have a website that exists outside the framework of the towns. The towns is the governmental body. The way that they communicate with their citizens and the kind of portal information that they provide is different from an entity that is marketing and promoting and cultivating interest both in investing, starting a business, as well as tourism efforts. So what we did was we went ahead and purchased and set up a website for you. We've got the foundation of that site. We thought a lot about different recommendations that we had made to you all, and even though Delaware'sFrontPorch.com was available, we decided to go something with the tagline that you know and love in Bridgeville. So what we actually bought was, we bought you'dbehome.com. And that way you can kind of take that and you can use it. It's a shorter version to be able to get people to the site, but I'll be able to set up a time where I can come over to the EDC and do a WordPress training with you guys and transition that site over. So hopefully you kind of feel like some of those things from a marketing and telling your story standpoint, we heard and were able to respond to. Now, in that same vein, if we jump over to Seaford, in Seaford, the message changes a little. We want to talk to you all about the idea of managing your message. Now, Seaford is a community that the awareness of good things going on is right here. And the awareness of jobs lost 35 years ago is up here. And we want to constantly cultivate and share all the positivity that's happening in Seaford. So you all have done a fantastic job rolling this stuff out. You're seeing the identity over and over again. You're seeing it consistently used. I love the pocket folder. In fact, the pocket folder is a great example of something that the EDC in Bridgeville had asked about, being able to have a professionally designed folder, but it's not particularly, there's nothing about the design that would date this. So you can produce these and you can use these for a multitude of reasons. So I really, really like that, and I wanted to commend Seaford on that. Take those tools and continue to run with those. In addition to that, and Randy, if you would pass those out, we also created a progress report for Seaford. And again, you guys essentially accomplished every single one. There might have been one that we realized why it was redirected because of funding sources, but you did it all from that strategy board. And being able to share that in a way, everything from the facade grants, and I want to share this because I think Randy will talk to you a little bit about facade grants. The message should not be that the community gave away $12,000 in facade grants. The message should be that the facade grant program spurred over $25,000 in investment in our buildings, because it's a matching program, and you use that program to draw out private sector investment as well. There was over $800,000 invested in the Miller building as part of the hospital system. The First Saturdays program, bringing folks to downtown, and if I can say, this has been one of those things where as you work with multiple communities at the same time, it was really interesting to be able to hear some of the observations of Seaford rolling out an event like First Saturdays in the similar time period that Bridgeville is rolling out Fabulous Fourth Fridays, and seeing how some events seem like they're getting traction faster than others. So that idea of programming in a regional fashion and sharing successes and knowledge that's learned is extremely important. You guys created a pretty awesome portable parklet, which I love how it was designed. You get the A+ because of the solar lights. Yeah. You launched the Seaford Tomorrow website. Seaford Tomorrow became a 501c3, which from a tactical standpoint was very, very important. You invested in phase 1 of the tree up lighting in Gateway Park. You've got new infill housing, branded banners. Okay, so lots of wins, lots of good things going on. But in Seaford, knowing what we have dealt with messaging in the past, I'm not going to spend too long on this, but I'm going to say it out loud because a lot of times people don't say things out loud. Managing the message is about knowing what market perception is and being able to make sure you're sharing information so your market isn't hurt when private sector elements aren't doing what you thought they were going to do. And I don't want to say this in an accusatory way at all, but this is the #2 building for the development right along the river. There's supposed to be 3 more of these. The community knows that there's supposed to be more of these. The community is going to blame Seaford. They're going to blame the market. They're going to say, see, I told you that would never happen. See, I told you that wouldn't work. See, that's too nice for us. They're going to say all kinds of things unless you manage and control the message. And managing and controlling the message doesn't mean you badmouth people, and it doesn't mean that you air laundry. It just foresight and knowledge of how talk happens and being able to proactively control that. And I just wanted to say that out loud. You know that I'm close by and I can help with that because that is it's a sticky topic. But it's important for all communities to hear that out loud. When a business starts and fails, the community gets blamed, not the business owner. When a development puts up a beautiful rendering and then never happens, it's never the developer's fault. People always blame the market conditions, so make sure that you're owning your own story. Does that make sense? Okay. So then from there, we jump over to Laurel. Now, Laurel has done a fantastic job again with adopting and using the different brand identities and the different tools there. The town has formally adopted it. They're using the seal. With everything that Leanne's doing, there's consistent use on the destination brand. Brian at LRC has adopted it. So the community is really singing in concert. They're telling the story consistently. Make sure that you are sharing access to that style guide and the resources that exist inside. And this goes for everybody. That toolkit is very, very important to be able to have access to. And in fact, Pat and I talked just before the meeting about a resource that had been created, but people didn't realize it existed. And she made a great point. I can't use it if I don't know it's there. So making sure the resources are making their way out into the hands of the community is really important, so that you can have multiple people help roll that identity out. Just like every other community, we've got these different ways that you can share marketing and telling that story. You guys are really sharing a lot. I think one of the cool things that's happened from Laurel lately is Laurel on social media has started sharing positive wins from other communities in the region. So you might read about a story of the bike shop in Milford that was shared by Laurel. That's a really, really great way to approach communication. Isn't it fun? I know. Again, merchandise, same story there. Celebrating the successes. I was so thrilled, and I'm not sure if the rest of you know about the watercolors project. When we did the branding, I had this kind of crazy idea of, well, let's just have an event about painting one of those watermelon buses. And they did the event last year, and it was this huge success, and then they did it again this year. So you've got these great rolling public art pieces that tie into that agricultural heritage and help to tell that story of the role of agriculture in the community. Go forward. And then also with you all, even though we know that we did not create a strategy board because we didn't do a CVP for you guys, we created a little summary page as well that you can use to tell some of those, everything from earning the DDD, the website that you have sharing information, the different new investments, the Strong Neighborhood Program, and community branding. So you guys have got a lot of that stuff that is really worth sharing. So you can see it's a similar format. Now all of a sudden you've got a lot of communities in the same place that are sharing their successes in the same way. And people, by doing this, not only are you telling your story, not only are you being able to help your citizens realize all the things that have started to happen in the community, you've also started to change the perception of what's happening in Western Sussex. And we're going to talk a lot about the idea of regionalism and the role that Western Sussex County and that 13 corridor plays in economic development for you all. But anytime we can connect those dots, it helps everyone. Because those are messages, it's almost like the partnerships are existing now, but we've got to make sure that it makes its way out into the market level on the consumer side. So with that, I'm going to let Randy talk about power in place.
So the second broad category that we feel like kind of relates to all three of the communities is the power of place. And again, just to reiterate what's on each of your individual handouts, in Bridgeville, we're going to focus on investing in your character, in Seaford on connections, and in Laurel on preserving your specific and unique competitive advantage. I'll tell a joke while we wait. All right, so in Bridgeville, first of all, the first tactic under that category is some vibrancy initiatives. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, actually, Ben. And by vibrancy initiatives, in some instances, as a matter of fact, later when we get to Laurel, I'm going to talk about that from the perspective of an actual grant. Using vibrancy and amenity grants as an actual tactic similar to facade grants. But here, I'm actually encouraging you in the public positive first impression on the traveler, introduces a lot of color, and we want to see you sprinkle the downtown area with similar initiatives, whether it's, in this instance, this illustrates, of course, a parklet that introduces both color, texture, trees, and I love this notion of using frisbees as a means to play giant checkers in the downtown area. But what I'd like to see, and of course, Jane, your building offers a perfect example, but even in publicly owned lots, I know we talked about the white building, once the police station vacates, could be a great opportunity for placemaking. So the introduction of colorful chairs, whether it's bistro tables here, rundown chairs, they just create that little pop of color that you can introduce these a few times along, what's the name of your main street there? Market. That's right, because there's a market here too. Well, Market Street, it just makes that really positive first impression for the traveler that's going through. And again, these can range from anything to the Adirondack chairs to the umbrellas. Of course, I love this notion of interactive art. This lady's actually a neighbor of mine who took old propane tanks, welded them together in different sizes, so that it becomes both a seat and an instrument. But again, this is our goal, is just to create sidewalks that are vibrant and active. And I can promise you, these sorts of public sector investments are going to be far cheaper than complicated facade grants or even streetscapes. Not that we're going to not do that, because here we are. Well, if you go back one, please. So you all showed us in that conference room that great before and after board of the various facades you all worked on in the past couple of years. We want to encourage you to continue to do that. And one of the key things is I really want to draw your attention to this photograph, is try to fund those things that are going to introduce the biggest pops of color and texture in the downtown into the sidewalk. You know, so far I know you did, was it not Sparky? What's the name of that? Nappies, there it is. Yeah, like you funded his awning. That's terrific. But see if you in the subsequent ones we can introduce as much or more color as possible to make those things pop. Again, historically I've talked to you all about facade component grants. If you've forgotten that, don't worry, because I'm going to reiterate that a lot more detail when we get tomorrow. But this whole notion of rather than funding overall facade grants, is maybe you just do signs or paint, or in this case, lights. So just to illustrate the power of a simple component facade grant approach, this was a building that people talked about. And again, I know Ben and I have the same feeling about this. This is not offensive looking at all. Could it be better? Probably, perhaps. But the great thing about this is it has a vibrant business inside. But in the next photo, this is a rendering I prepared for you the last time, you can see that how with just an awning and just an infill of some brick panels and some signage, you can really take this to the next level. And of course, Jane, thankfully, you allowed us to take a look, kind of a refresh look at this building when you occupied it. Back in 2015, when we were there, of course, the use that we were considering was a group of, sorry, we were promoting drinking in your downtown, but that's okay. And so we removed the metal awning up at the top, exposed the brick, a continuous canopy, and again, it was, in that instance, it was just fictitious, but it was just to promote that. In the next, we just layered on what happens if we introduce this notion of outdoor activity and vibrancy. And again, it's amazing what just a pop of color can do to the whole sense of activity in downtown. And the final iteration was this whole emphasis on the public realm, the streetscapes, and specifically the crosswalks. You know, just that crosswalk and this pop out of the tree changes the whole dynamic in terms of the comfort and feel of the place. So next slide, we want to go ahead and fast forward to reality, and we're going to update the image, but with your particular goal in mind. And I don't think I'm betraying any secrets. You know, Jane is very much open to kind of cohabitating that building both with her antique shop and ideally try to recruit a coffee shop. And so the challenge was, what are some ways that we might co-brand this building so that it's very clear that it both belongs to Downtown Alley as well as a new coffee shop. And so this is just an update to the previous rendering to show that approach. You know, she graciously said, you know, I'd love to have a coffee shop up front, which really makes a lot of sense from activating the street. And again, you know who we really want you to recruit, but I didn't want to put any pressure on that vendor, so I just picked this Mocha Joe's arbitrarily, okay? And just relocating your side over here. Now, I understand, you know, the metal awning is up there, and we can work with that. But if you could go an extra mile, I think this would be a little bit more attractive. And again, if you compare that with a facade graphic, you could component that might fund one of those elements, then perhaps that makes it possible. Thanks. So now we're going to shift gears over, no, I'm sorry, we still are in Bridgeville. And so in terms of beautification, you guys, again, have done a lot. I love this installation here. I love these banners, both the ones that are branded based on Ben's work. I particularly love these historical references, and of course, a shout out to your father, here. And of course, it's kind of like the Apostle Paul. I just want to say, but excel still more. Okay? For example, is it possible that we might put on these poles that already have these banners, might we be able to add some very colorful plants? Trust me, I recognize it's an expense. Trust me, I recognize it's a maintenance issue. But look at what that does to the public realm. And again, far less investment than streetscape and facade. Similarly, and I know these are pretty brand new installations, but what about some colorful landscaping around the base? Just pops of beautification throughout the downtown. Crosswalks. Again, we want to make sure we aren't telling you to do the most ambitious thing first. It's going to cost the largest amount of money and be a complicated construction process. Have we encouraged you all to do a streetscape long term? Yes. But do we think you ought to do it in the next couple of years? Probably not. But there are things that you can do along the way, including crosswalks, to just go ahead and foreshadow that and prepare the traveler to try to stop. This is what we prepared, of course, in front of Bucky Joe's, but don't forget, there are creative strategies. You don't just have to paint plain old panicles, okay? So if you want to consider something a little bit more creative, feel free to do that. But eventually, yes, go ahead and long-term be preparing for streetscapes. These are things that we prepared the last time. This is the gateway out of, is this Highway 13?
Yep.
That's what I thought. And again, just the notion of the impact that just a little bit of landscaping around the base of the signs makes. And of course, this was the streetscape treatment we proposed on the street. Could somebody help me with the name of the street? That's Market 2? How can it be Market 2 in terms of?
Oh, sorry, that's,
Main.
Main Street, okay.
Delaware Avenue.
Yeah.
Well, this is South Main Street coming out.
Yes, ma'am, that's right. Thank you.
South Main.
So the next one, I just want to remind you, so long term, this is you looking down Market towards City Hall, and go ahead to the next slide. And again, without moving the curb to make the streetscape far more affordable, it's just a delineation of the parking lane with these occasional bump outs so that we can now introduce significant shade trees, as well as wayfinding signage based on the designs that have been made. But again, you don't have to do this tomorrow. Go ahead and do the crosswalks, especially something that's creative and textured. And again, I'm working in a town right now, by the way, where we constructed these ourselves. In other words, we got DOT permission for the design, but we didn't ask the DOT to hire a contractor to do it. We did it ourselves. It saved a great deal of money because it's not a terribly complicated construction project. Finally, you got some opportunities. As you know, I couldn't believe our good fortune. What are you laughing at, Patsy? So when we were here last time, the irony was, go ahead to the next slide, please, Ben. You wanted me to take a look at expanding the senior center, and of course we were trying to work with this building, and so the next generation, it was a small infill building that would go there, and then we said, if you were ever to be able to tear this one down, then you could expand it to be this. Well, as you know, that building's no longer there. And so the possibility to do something is right. Now, don't get married to this architecture because I really could care less. I just want to talk about it from the standpoint of good urban planning and the fact of moving this building all the way up to the edge of the sidewalk, placing the parking behind it, and so you keep that street wall buildings alive. It's something we'll talk about in all of this. So now we're going to move over to Seaford, and again, the thing that was very clear when we talked in here the other morning was just the importance of your connections. Connecting both from Highway 13 to the downtown, connecting a lot of street names in my head. Is it High Street across First Front and Market, and then we'll talk about other types of connections in a second. So out to streetscape US 13 to downtown, You've seen this before. This is just to refresh your memory and to show the other towns. Existing conditions, and again, Laurel, this is a great lesson for you. If you don't mind going back one. I apologize, I failed to take a photograph at the place in your city that I described yesterday, where it seemed kind of open from building to buildings. But here's kind of a similar example from your good friends here at Seaford. In absence of really clear delineations and taller edges, the width of this roadway almost feels like it's from building to building, and it's just really, really vast. And to the degree that we can make it feel like it's only the width of the roadway, it's going to make it feel a lot more comfortable for the traveler. And frankly, it will probably calm or slow your traffic down better than any posted speed limit sign will ever do. And so that's what was illustrated in the next slide, where we stained the asphalt in the bike lane. Again, this is just the stamped asphalt. It doesn't necessarily have to be brick pavers, but just something that introduces a splash of color and texture to slow the letters down. And again, you don't always have the ability to plant shade trees. Over here, you've got these major power lines. So the solution in this case is to put a more colander tree and place it on the actual property side of the utility. And again, you can see, even though you still see the lines, the trees, even on that side of the road, help to define that visual code. Do you see the difference between that sense of enclosure and the previous slide? Okay, next. But to me, and you guys have already figured this out, this is the deal breaker for you guys. This is the problem you've got to solve. I like the way Ben put it. In many ways, Front Street and High Market is sort of functioning like the Great Wall of China. It's separating this part, Medical Road, and over here, High Street. And so we need to figure out ways to make those connections a lot more definitive. And so just by way of reminder, this is the plan that had crosswalks up at High, as well as down here, Water Street. Next, please. And this was the illustration that was prepared years ago. Next. And so these crosswalks here are here, and of course, are at the top. You all strongly prefer the next iteration, which simply took Market Street, which you own, and this is illustrated as either true brick pavers or as stamped asphalt. So that now you have this delineation, and frankly, what I urged you to do the other day, and this is just for the benefit of those who are in the room, is to try to design this street and this park in such a way that this road feels like it belongs more to the park than it is the roadway. Okay? In other words, it feels like an extension of the park that you just happen to be able to drive across, as opposed to a roadway that can sometimes run into the park. Even including, since you own it, you could put bollards at the bottom and the top. Those are for festivals, and now you've got this entire zone that functions as a park with an outdoor common space. But you made a request to look at some different treatments here, and that's what I've shown. And so here it shows the verticality of introducing the flags, which I do think makes an impression, and then changing that just to improve the raised wall that we talked about in Charlotte.
I think some of the other things that we wanted to hit on was not just physical connections, but also programmatic connections. And I know we had talked before about the idea of doing a bridge dinner, which I think would be a cool idea. It would be one of those things that the event not only would be something that would really re-engage the population, but it would also be something that it'd be the talk. You know, it's a pretty cool event. There are a couple of these. The one in the bottom is from Belfast. The one on the top is from Rochester, New York. So you can find some examples of similar events. Now, in addition to that, one of the other things, playing off what Councilman Henderson said, and I think it's a really, really great observation, this idea of how do we wrap our arms around some of the diversity that exists now, and then also use really kind of a new private sector business that's come on the scene to introduce this idea of international and cultural foods. You've got, new part of your business community right on High Street that has really opened people up to new flavors. So maybe you guys could introduce or entertain the idea of an international flavor fest. And that's both food and cultural awareness. But it's a great way to send an invitation out community-wide and create a really vibrant, active feel on High Street.
All right, so back to Laurel, your strategy for improving and maintaining the sure you preserve your competitive advantage. And in that case, your competitive advantage, of course, is just the terrific stock of historic buildings, both commercial and especially residential. And one of the things that we didn't really talk about in great detail is the need of Laurel to quote unquote buy some time. You know, you will not get investors to occupy every one of your buildings next week. Some will come next week, next month, next year, and so what can we do to sort of stem the tide until those buildings are occupied? And as Bill alluded to, sometimes you can tolerate one or two vacancies in your downtown, but you get a couple just in a row, and unfortunately it becomes a perception. And who gets blamed? Downtown is the city itself. And so these are some tactics that we can employ, and again, the key word is temporary. Okay, I don't want you to employ these strategies forever. This is just to buy some time until these buildings are occupied. So the first thing you can do, of course, is the ubiquitous place art in the windows. This was a strategy I saw in Illinois that can be used in various ways. It's just something thinking butcher paper, but printing historic photographs from the place on there, placing in the windows, so that you really focus on this sort of nostalgic streetscape rather than the fact that the building is empty. And of course, you've got some great imagery from the train wreck and some others that you can use. Next, this strategy, sometimes you have a building that you can't occupy or get to the inside to utilize. So again, this just employs vinyl clings, and these are the dotted ones that you can see through. And you just place those on the outside of the window. Again, this is not meant to be permanent. It's just a temporary treatment until the building is occupied. And then finally, you know, combining with some of the marketing information and strategies that Ben has employed, is just doing some community pride posters that can occupy those windows. This is from my home state in Conway, South Carolina, where they simply had simple statements from downtown residents and business owners about why they love living or doing business in Conway. And what you really found out is, as you were reading and trying to find the person that you knew or you went to church with or your kids went to school with, you were so focused on reading their stories, and maybe your own if you're featured, that you really didn't pay attention to the fact that the building was empty. So those are just some strategies for free to kind of do while you're waiting for these buildings to be occupied. That's why these are 11 by 17 posters you can kind of write off your own over office later than print. Okay. One of the things that we talked about the other day, if you remember, we had this interesting conversation about you've got these terrific architectural assets and resources, but some people in your community don't really appreciate them. And what are some things that we can do? And we talked about the fact that we didn't want to be patronizing it. We need to do it educationally. Okay? And so these are some ploys that are kind of the softer, kinder versions of ways to raise the bar of understanding about the architectural assets that you have, rather than strict design guidelines. Okay? And mind you, I'm a big fan of design guidelines, but sometimes those are too premature. So one, and by the way, I can supply you this PDF if you're going to read this. This is one of a great one from Siloam Springs, Arkansas, and they just call it a downtown design and style handbook. And I love the way they phrase it. Look down here, I don't know if you can see this, but it's something to think about. In other words, it's not a recommendation, it's not a requirement, it's just here's some basic design principles that you need to think about in your downtown. So that's one approach, is what we call it downtown style guide. Next slide. And it kind of goes a step up, and this is what we talked about yesterday, which is the architectural character. And what it does is you take specific elements from primarily, but not solely, your commercial structures, and you just peel them away so that people understand, oh, that's why the storefront is recessed, or it has a bulkhead, display room, a transom. Why does the cornice rest on the top of the building? You just pick apart each of those elements and just share it back to them. Okay? Again, we are within a mile of guidelines. Next. This is particularly helpful when it comes to residential structures. This is what we call an architectural pattern book. This is what Ben was telling you that we worked on in South Carolina, where you take a particular style, and then you go to the next slide, please, and you just pull off some of the elements of those different styles of architecture, and you just explain it to property owners. These kinds of windows and doors would be appropriate to this kind of house. And the nice thing in Laurel is there are quite a number of styles, but there aren't hundreds. There are probably just dozens. And so you can architecture, this kind of architecture, appropriate ways to renovate those buildings, perhaps even appropriate ways to add to them. Next. So this was one of the key things that we talked about in Laurel, and for the good folks in Bridgeville, and I suppose Secret, you listen as well. You guys have kind of done the full-blown facade grants, and kudos to you guys for doing that. But for a homeowner approach, sometimes a simpler dimension would be the whole facade component approach. And all this approach does is some of the typical components or elements that are typically associated with fixing up an entire facade. In this grant approach, you just do one thing per year. In the next slide, in Beaufort, South Carolina, a couple of years ago, all they did were awnings. And the next slide, Parksville right now is only doing signs. In the next slide, Searcy, Arkansas, they funded rears of buildings. And then the final one, back to Conway, South Carolina, they funded slipcover removals. And I just want to tell you this one story before I tell the benefits of facade components. How many of you have a building like this in your town? You know, and oftentimes we tend to really prejudge these people, or I should say judge these people. In this instance, it happened to be an elderly man who bought the building, and it wasn't that he was a bad property owner. He just was unsure about how much it would cost to remove it and what he might encounter once the slipcover was removed. And so I first did a rendering to show it, and he said, well, I'll try it. You can see the better news is what he uncovered was fantastic. Next slide, please. So using the component facade grant approach, the city offered one-time component grants just for slipcover removal. 5 of the remaining 6 buildings in the downtown removed theirs. And so this strip of buildings, you can see this building is this building, this dramatic impact it made by removing all of the slipcovers. This is current conditions. And so again, the power of the component facade grant approach is a smaller pool of money can go farther and more property owners are allowed to play. The example I used the other day was signs. If you only had $5,000, if you did a 50-50 match, you probably can affect signage on 10 to 15 buildings. Now I understand the drawback. It means it's going to take us longer to be able to fix up all of the buildings and everything you want to do in the buildings. But imagine the power of touching 15 of your property owners' buildings within a 12-month period. I think it would earn you a lot of credit. Next, please. All right, so we wanted to take a look at some actual buildings in Laurel, and this is one of the ones that we looked at on your tour. And again, the thing that really appealed to us about this one is a couple things, most especially the architectural character itself. But number 2 is proximity to one of the trailheads, the Ramble Riverwalk. And so based on that, we just felt like this building is primarily suited to become an outfitters for Broad Creek. And I could just, I mean, honestly, and the thing that's pretty shocking about this rendering is there's not a lot to it. I mean, mostly it's paint. Yes, it's a new entry system, but mostly it's paint. The rest, of course, I'm not dealing with the inside. You know, I'm sure there's work to be done in there. But the power of painting a couple of colorful kayaks really is almost pretty shocking. You might go back and forth real quick. So, existing conditions and new. So maybe that's something, you know, Pat, I can send this to Brian.
Yeah, Brian needs to see that.
Yeah, if he wants to talk to the property owner and see what incentives they make to do to try to lure, not only the fixing of the building, but I think this particular use would be terrific.
And honestly, as we were going around, that's one of those things where, I mean, first of all, the roof is starting to fall in, and most people look at those buildings in every community and they're just like, you need to pull that down. Well, when you have a stone or block side and brick front, just because a wood roof is failing doesn't mean that the building needs to come down. But what was so interesting is you can hardly even see it on the left-hand side behind the kayaks. But part of the reason that this building really kind of spoke to being an outfitter was this kind of garage door side chute that it has with easy access to get these big things in and out. And, you know, so just being able to share something like this with the folks in your community, it kind of raises an excitement that and a potential that maybe they didn't realize that the buildings had.
I don't know if you can see, but that's Jamie, like squatting down.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that Ben really made a strong appeal, and I completely agree to him. I mean, I was drooling over your houses. I mean, my goodness, this house.
Please buy and restore one.
There you go. Honestly, that's my dream. If I ever won the lottery, I would invest $100,000 in every town I work in. And it sounds like I could buy one of these houses, no problem. But this caliber of house with that kind of detail, if you just see it, think San Francisco in your mind right now. And the kind of paint scheme that would draw out all those details. And this is just one street, and you've got dozens and dozens and dozens of streets full of these kinds of houses. I mean, here just a very humble, modest attempt that needs some updating, but that color scheme alone, you can begin to see the kind of character that you enjoy. And so we don't know all the answers yet, but we know one of the things in our gut is it's just going to be essential for you guys to create this culture of residential restoration. And there are a lot of things we mean by that. I'm going to talk about it a little bit, and then Ben's going to take over. There was a town that I used to live in. And there's actually a neighborhood down in Charleston. And there's certain neighborhoods that when the houses start flipping, it gets a certain vibe, and everybody kind of wants to be there. But especially when it's combined with this element of really creative restoration. You don't want to be the low-cost alternative. You want to be the kind of place of choice because it's really amazing. And whether it's I know in Charleston that we have this whole Restoration Institute where they're bringing back the restoration arts to do true horsehair plaster or wrought iron work. It doesn't have to be that complicated, but we've just got to figure out a way to get this vibe going that it's cool to buy and fix up some of these houses. And there's some really creative things that Ben's been a part of in Milford that are doing just this.
Yeah, so, I mean, in Milford, a very small group of residents decided that they wanted to help fund historic preservation. So they started by doing an event. So they started a Roaring 20s party, and it was a fundraiser. So, it starts off with an excuse for people to drink and dress up, which they found others were interested in. And so they started to do this event, and they would take the revenues from the event, and they would select a applicant and fund restoration of their home. So they've just completed the first home that is actually right on Walnut Street in downtown Milford. So you can just kind of see it was stabilization, it was paint, the right versus the left. So,
What street's that on?
it's on Walnut, South Walnut. Yep. So, it's a very, very humble gesture. It's just one house, but it's a community-involved effort that takes fun and connects it to historic preservation. And honestly, I think that that's one of the biggest things we need to do. The term historic preservation is so, I don't want to say highbrow, but it's just like cold. It's not exciting. It's not fun. It's not something that normal people feel like they do. So making this approachable, but also having that goal of preserving those assets, because Laurel is the home of more structures on the historic register than any other community in the state. Over 800 structures on the historic register, and you've got to cultivate that economy and that interest to preserve them.
Here's just some really simple observations and quick and easy tricks. You've got these transformers in the downtown, virtually every community does. And again, anymore, these vinyl wraps are extremely affordable. You pay a designer and an artist comes out and just cuts it and puts it on there. And so for a couple $100, it's just one of those small touches that take the community from good to great. Finally, don't worry, we are not going to go to class right now, but I was kind of talking to you all while we're walking around about some basic urban planning principles and just the importance of edges. A while ago in Seaford, we talked about that roadway and the importance of the roadway edges. And the reason is because your buildings create this sort of outdoor room by virtue of the roadway being the floor, the walls of the buildings becoming the walls, and the perceived enclosure of the city by virtue of the common height and the tree realize they really aren't maintaining the landscape and the vegetation that's there now. And therefore, I decided to take a different approach and do more of a hard edge. And at the same time, we're going to look at some treatments to this wall in that green. So the next slide, we're going to have 3 different iterations. So the first iteration is all we're going to do is introduce this wall. And just, even without the trees magically going away, trust me, they're coming back in the next iteration. You feel how now it doesn't feel like it's empty, okay, just by introducing this low wall. And then of course this becomes a really strategic gesture to talk about a very important historic event, you know, the train coming off. And you also get this co-branding of the city as well as the event that. So the next one is a real simple addition. It's just adding the trees back in as they're growing. But we're introducing people that hopefully the property will allow them to play in the green space. Power once these trees mature and you've got some shade. And then let's go ahead and if we can get property owner approval, introduce shade sales. You know, if you don't have the ability to plant a lot of significant shade trees, these shade sales can also introduce a pop of color. Yeah, I don't have it before and after, but hopefully you like the after better.
All right, and then final section coming around the bend. And I think Randy and I are going to kind of tag team this. But this idea of seizing the opportunity, I think first thing, the fabulous Fourth Fridays that you guys are doing in Bridgeville, really good event. You've realized kind of quick success with that, and it shows hunger for the community to have that activity. Really the only advice that I would give is as you create events like that, if you can find simple ways to roll that event into your branding so that the look and feel, the typeface, it all starts to connect with one another. Simply so, people are funny that they will go to a fabulous Fourth Fridays, they will have a great time, and then on Saturday, they'll say nothing ever happens in Bridgeville. And they'll say, well, what about that event you were at? Yeah, that was great. So you have to connect the dots for them and really make that super easy. In addition, one of the things that I took a quick look at was I took a look at the really, really good flow chart that you all created. And Randy, I'm not sure how many copies I have. I'd love it if you would actually share a couple of those with folks from other communities, if there are some. What I did, I recreated this slightly and streamlined some of the terminology. But all in all, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you guys were hitting on 98%. What they did was they created a one-page document that literally walked you through the business development process in the community. It helped you to identify how you could fast track, what kind of issues allowed for smooth sailing. It also identified some of those things that would involve slight more difficulty or challenge or coordination with other entities statewide. And in the digital document, it includes links directly to all those entities like the state fire marshal. And so really, really good. Honestly, the major critique of the pre-existing was the simple fact that we want to make sure that if you're going to put that much work into a resource, that it's got the logo and it's connecting back into the community. So the relationship that you start to build with this guidance ties in. But I was really, really thrilled with the way this was set up. Now, we also talked about the bike trail. I thought about all different things, so I figured I'd just throw an idea out, the Apple Basket Bike Trail. Name it whatever you want, but name it something fun. That's one of the biggest mistakes that communities make. It's like they'll do all the hard work, they'll get all this stuff paved, they'll work with utilities and get poles up, and then at the end of the day, it'll become the Greater Bridgeville Health and Wellness Trail. Or, it's like, wow, what a buzzkill, So make sure you create an identity that helps to deliver your character back. And I just created some little banners. We had talked a little bit about signage, but with you being able to get some great lamp posts and stuff up, I thought maybe banners might be a nice way to help connect, especially on some of those crosses. Jumping over to to Seaford first Saturdays, simply making sure that first Saturday was a little bit all over the board with some of the logo and everything. It's like they had created what you see on the Pokemon Go poster, and then it seemed like after they had used it a while, someone along the way had tried to figure out a way to get a 1 in the middle of that thing. So I just went ahead and created one of those for them to hopefully make that a little bit easier. But again, great event, great strategy at retail promotion. Now, this is my opportunity to be extremely boring, but I did something. I wanted to give everybody something that was what I thought pretty valuable. So, okay. So Bridgeville, and I apologize because of how big these are. I only have 2 copies, and let me explain to you what I'm handing out. I'm going to give you guys one group of these, and I'm going to give you guys one group of these. This is a executive summary and a retail leakage study. Now, what the retail leakage study does is it compares what the businesses in your town sell to what the customers in your town spend. So it gives you the opportunity to really see some interesting numbers, and these are the same numbers that our national chains use. Now, I'll give that to you guys, and then one. I have done 2 packets. One is for your locality. So it is just for your city or town limits. The second package, I defined my own target area, and I created a Western Sussex corridor. So what that does is keep 2 of them together. One's with rural and one's the whole region, and then y'all keep that back. So here we have is we have graphics, we have registration, we have rate breakdown, all those things in their executive summary, and then it has so you got your public is on the roadmap, that is basic graphic songs. Then when you use this sheet. This sheet where retail is done. Begin. So in the first category, it shows what customers in your geography spend by category. The second category shows what the stores in your locality sell. And then the third category shows, are you making money or losing? Does that make sense? So it's called a gap analysis. You're studying the gap in sales and demand and supply. So I am more than willing to sit down with each community, set up a time, come to EDC, go through this. These are difficult to know how to use. Sometimes they can be difficult to read. There are a couple things that can be made very, very clear from this document. One is showing you definite opportunity. We are losing X number of dollars in this category. That might make for a logical retailer for us to target.
So the red's an opportunity, is that what you're saying? The red minuses?
No. The red is actually showing where your stores are drawing in more business than your consumers. It's an outperform. So your blacks are opportunity areas. Now, the reason why I gave you 2, one is just for your town limits. And I want to be very, very honest. That's not going to tell you a whole lot of information. Your town limits don't have anything to do with market conditions or retail trends. So the second one really helps you to understand a little bit more about the health of the economy in Western Sussex County. And those are some things that we can really dig into. Like I say, I don't want to get too deep into this today because it's a very, very powerful set of data. This is the same information that national retail chain site selectors use. What they actually do is they analyze this data. They analyze in different geographic areas, and once certain categories trigger a certain amount of leakage, that targets them and says, oh, this is a market that we should start to look at. So when people talk about the idea of towns going out and recruiting retailers, there's a certain amount of that that's actually a fable. Like it doesn't, you don't really recruit national chains. Not anymore. You might have 20 years ago. National chains are different. National chains, some national chains have stopped doing retail analysis altogether, and they simply are allowing other chains to do the research for them, and then they're site selecting off of them. Every time a Walmart decides to go in a location, Cato knows they're good to go. So Cato doesn't have to do any retail research. So what we'll do as we move through this process is we'll set up an opportunity where I can come back and sit down with each community and we'll dig directly into your numbers. And the byproduct of that meeting will be a very targeted byproduct. It won't be just, hey, let's sit down and let's talk about things. We will create a one-page document with the most logical retail targets for your community, so that you can leave that meeting with a summary of retail categories that make the most sense for your market. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you. If you do have any questions, though, if you're kind of looking through it, you see stuff and you want to ask me today, feel free. But I just wanted to get that in your hands, because as we're talking about this, we feel like data and information is very, very important. Now, in addition to that, I think the idea of seizing the opportunity and knowing when things are coming around, here in Seaford, I have always been excited about what the power plant would be when it wasn't a power plant anymore. So, you know, I understand that things constantly are in cycle. But if you find that the direction of that kind of falls back on your side of the court, and you have the opportunity to kind of shape that, that is the kind of building that people are excited to invest in these days. These are some images from Rock Hill, South Carolina, of an old pumping station that they turned into what they call a pump house restaurant. And it's a different structure, it's a lot taller than yours is, but you can see on the inside very much taking that industrial look and feel. It's something that's real, real exciting. And yeah, as Randy talked about suggesting the brew house in Bridgeville, you know, we'd love to see a brewery in Seaford as well. I'm not sure whether that says something about us, but you know, being able to go ahead and set that vision. When a community has an asset like this, it is completely and totally appropriate for a community to set a vision for what they'd love to have come out of that building. So go ahead and set your sights on that. Then jumping over to Laurel, using activities. Here's the thing with Laurel. You guys need help. You need volunteers. You need more bodies. You know, you've been doing amazing things. There's just not enough of you. And it's, you know, anything you can do. Hear that same story in Bridgeville, hear the same story in Seaford. You know, when you go through and you think about doing an event, introducing a new event, those are always volunteer-rich activities. I want to tell you all, this is not just for Laurel, this is for everybody. This is a very important lesson. As you are crafting your vision, as you've got these groups that are doing things, whether you're EDC in Bridgeville, whether you're working with any of the groups, Seaford Tomorrow, you have certain people that you want involved in planning and implementing. And then you have the workforce, the ones that show up day of and haul garbage cans. And many times we aren't clear enough about what kind of volunteer we need. And you want to clearly delineate the difference between the thinkers and the doers. You want to understand that just because, I mean, like me, I travel all over the country. Sometimes on Saturday, I want to just go and work a beer tent. Like, that's how I want to volunteer. But me working a beer tent on a Saturday is not an indication that I now want to be a board member with monthly meetings. So think about the different ways that you can allow people to get involved, and also be very sensitive and aware that there are different commitment levels. And part of the reason why people don't volunteer is because they're scared that a single give will turn into a monthly ask. You know, so be really, really deliberate about what you need. Does that make sense?
Oops, sorry.
Oh, and that's you.
Yep,
So it's you
I'll get.
from here.
But were you done with that?
I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also in Seaford, we had this conversation about creating density downtown, and the fact that in many instances you've got these buildings that are really deep and large, and either they're not occupied, or more specifically they're occupied by professional uses, and therefore we don't have the presence of a great deal of retail uses. So one of the things that we recommended in Paris, Arkansas, was pairing that need with the whole facade component grant. And so in that instance, the grant was to construct a demising wall to create a small micro retail space on the front side of the building. So if you just look at the simple diagram on the left, architectural details notwithstanding, this whole notion of a professional office could still exist in the back just fine, because typically you are not going to be just wandering downtown in search for a tax accountant. You probably know their address. You're going to them. But you can now place a smaller retail venture on the front side, and you activate the street itself. On the right, the before and after, up at the top was it a Christmas? I forget the nature of the shop, but it was just a really large shop where she just stored, in other words, she occupied the building to the right, and the one that we're focused on, all of her annual stuff that she only pulled out at Christmas time was just in storage in the back. And so by virtue of building a demising wall a certain depth from the front wall, she could still store all of her stuff behind the wall, but now it opened up 2 retail spaces on the square. And so that's something, a trick of the trade on these really deep buildings. If you're struggling to have enough density of retail ventures in your downtown, then you may want to consider a demising wall tactic. And then in Laurel, to bring to life, we talked about component grants, but this was the one that we really camped out the most on, is we would strongly encourage you all both to populate the downtown with vibrancy initiatives that you would do as a public partner, but even consider financially incenting private sector initiatives that would introduce color and vibrancy in the downtown. In other words, Seaford just constructed a parklet out of the goodness of their heart. But if a business in downtown Laurel was considering building a parklet out in front of their space, perhaps you all would underwrite a certain percentage of that to generate that kind of vibrancy in your downtown. So that's the parklet on the right. Again, we talked about this was just infusing the downtowns with opportunities to promote stickiness. The fact that people would stick around and do things, whether it's chess or checkers. Again, you've seen this before. The one image I didn't kind of emphasize on the bottom left, those are student-created portable putt-putt golf courses. And they are created at different styles and different, themes. And they can be congregated or spread throughout the downtown to kind of lure people in and through the downtown area. But some of the easier ones, we've already seen this slide, chairs and colorful things. Don't forget about your sidewalks. Whether painting them in the middle, this is what's kind of now I refer to as a horizontal mural. We just actually paint something on the sidewalk. And this becomes a great community building project. You can get an artist to draw out the stencil, and then you literally recruit volunteers and children to paint by numbers, and Johnny gets to paint the red, Susie gets to paint the blue, et cetera, et cetera. It just turns a boring sidewalk into a piece of art. Whatever you do, please allow people to draw with chalk on your sidewalks. These are some of the simple ones. The poster boards you say, before I die, I want to. And then here was what we talked about the other day, Jamie, and I think you said you had a couple of cornholes. cornholes, and you've got that corner lot and the blank lot, you can easily put out a set of bocce balls. Just anything to create opportunities for families and people to have something to do when they're in your downtown area. And of course, I'm a huge fan of giant Jenga on the right, as well as giant checkers or portable ping pong tables. Whatever you do, and this by the way, this slide applies to every community in the room. Ben alluded to the fact that you cannot underestimate people's inability to connect the dots between your hard work and what they've just experienced or done. And so you're just going to have to toot your own horn. And every time you build a parklet, or you fix up a facade, or you repair a sidewalk, or you put up hanging baskets of flowers, just consider sticking out a simple sandwich board that relates it back to your project. In Seaford, it would be Seaford Tomorrow, or the CVP plan. In Bridgeville, it would be your agency, Laurel. I'm not sure of who it would be. But just make sure you connect the dots in the public's mind that all of these initiatives are working towards a common objective, hopefully one that they're familiar with. So that kind of wraps it up. Ben, do you want me to stop the recording or keep it going as we talk about next steps and the Meister task?
Just go ahead and keep it going.
Okay.
About Meister task and then shut it down.
Okay. So some of the next steps, first of all, the presentation we've just made along with our commentary, we're going to upload it in the form of a movie to YouTube, hopefully within the next 24 hours. And therefore, somebody who wasn't here, for example, Brian, he can go and watch it and listen to it and have a complete summary of what was presented. At some point between now and December, Ben and I are going to populate an online task management application website with your town or city specific recommendations and then implementation tactics. So in other words, those outlined and those bulleted points that you have in your hand, we're going to actually break those down into greater detail. And in just a second, I'm going to show you where they will be located. It's in a website called Meister Task, which is an online collaborative website. And I'm going to show you a demo in just a moment. But Ben is going to come back probably sometime in December to do a dedicated training on how to use this application. The reason we're postponing it to December is the additional 3 towns that we're going to be doing roadmap work in will occur in November, and that way we can do the training for everyone. Again, we want to make this very clear. It is a tool, but you don't have to use it. It's completely up to you. Some towns that we've given it to, they love it, and they've run with it. Others have not used it, but it's just a mechanism to make sure everybody is in the loop, and I'll explain that a little bit more in the next slide. And then we're going to be creating what we call an executive summary compilation. Think about it as a report light. You're busy, we're busy, you don't want to read hundreds of pages, and so we're going to simplify it down into the real critical things that you need to know. We're going to make sure we provide links and or resources that we've talked about. By way of example, Jamie and Leanne, yesterday we talked about the facade master plan. So we'll make sure you have access to those things through that executive summary document if I don't give it to you before. And of course, the nice thing you have by virtue of Diane Laird in downtown Delaware is even if Ben is in another part of country or I've flown back to South Carolina, they're going to still be here to be your advocate and your support. So Meister Task, really quickly, I'll do this slide and then we'll stop the recording. It kind of looks like this. And in a minute, I'm going to show you one that's in the initial stages, one that's partially, and then this one is kind of fully ramped up. And pardon me one second, Tricia. What you see on the far right is actually the part that I want to draw your attention to the most. You have all of these people represented by these blue dots. And one of the things that we find out so often is when we start trying to manage these projects, and in some towns, the chamber's doing this event, and then Seaford Tomorrow's doing this. The city is doing this. And so in absence of a regular meeting, sometimes, I know this never happens in Delaware, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, right? And so what this allows us to do is to populate over here the to-do list, and anybody that's associated with this site knows every time that some action is taken on an item. If you upload something, if you successfully do the event, if you post something,
everybody is notified. Now, one of the key members, if you're so inclined, actually have a member of the press if you know and trust them. Therefore, they can never make the claim that they didn't know what was going on and again, what it moves is from the task itself to when it's been done or installed and then to completion. Now, what we're going to try to do really quickly, and I'm going to stop the recording, Ben, and we'll look at a website, and then we'll just open it up for Q&A.